Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Bleachers, called Gone Now. You know, I distinctly remember not expecting to love Bleachers' debut album, Strange Desire, as much as I did back in 2014. Hell, I remember watching and reading the other reviews after I made mine, which gave it some token appreciation for I Want to Get Better, and then proceeded to tear it apart. This album was not a critical darling. And you know what, here's the thing. I completely understand where the majority of those criticisms actually came from. Is it a shameless 80s pastiche with a frontman who doesn't have the range or presence that he thinks he has? Relentlessly overwritten with an earnestness that pushes it between aggressively corny and, yeah, a little bit embarrassing? Yeah, all that's true. Absolutely. And yet, to some extent, the overwritten earnestness, when paired with Jack Antonoff's uncanny knack for huge hooks and a deceptively potent album concept lurking beneath the surface that did not get the credit it deserved, it led to a record that hit me like a tidal wave, and I still return to fairly regularly, even more so since I got it on vinyl. It's one of my favorite records of 2014 easily, and since then, Jack Antonoff, he's popped up all over the place as a behind-the-scenes songwriter and producer for Sarah Bareilles, Lorde, the best song that Rachel Platten ever made, Stand By You, and a little someone, you might have heard of her, Taylor Swift. Yeah, you might want to know the reason why so many of you idolized 1989 as a pop record beyond just the singles. Most of the thanks you can direct towards Jack Antonoff. He was behind a lot of that. So in other words, you can bet I was looking forward to this album. I hadn't listened to any of the lead-off singles going in. I was excited just to go in cold for once and just take it all in, especially considering he brought on board both Lorde and Carly Rae Jepsen in order to back him up. So, okay, what do we get from Gone Now? Well, alright. This isn't gonna be precisely an easy discussion because I can't tell you how much I really wanted to love this album going in. Because again, Jack Antonoff's earnestness, his desire to swing big for the fences, it lets me forgive a lot about how scattershot and messy his approach can be. It was definitely true on Strange Desire. There was kind of a messy album, but I liked enough of it to give him a pass. But I have a line, and Gone Now crosses it, and then keeps going. Not in the least because, while thematically it retraces similar but lesser ground as Strange Desire, instrumentally it's just not as potent. And as I said when I covered Halsey a few days ago with John over at ARTV, it reflects an artist who is misunderstanding his strengths as a performer in order to just plow into territory that just doesn't flatter his abilities and his strengths. And no, his reflexive self-justification does not cut it for me. So to explain all that, let me pose to you a question that tended to get missed and ignored 3 years ago. What was at the core of Strange Desire, and when it did work, why did it work? Well, if the main thematic conceit was confronting an inexplicable old flame from the past who spurs a crisis of conscience in our protagonist as he's sucked back to those nostalgic early days, and despite it being a reminder that you still got things to process in your own life, you got things you need to deal with in order to get better, part of that processing is realizing you have to let that woman go on her own separate way. Now, Gone Now, if anything, is deepening this theme, but recontextualizing it as well. Since Jack Antonoff has been in a long-term relationship for some time, he's acknowledging that his partner, in her own particular way, is forcing him to confront the roots of his own demons simply by her being there and him wanting to be honest. And it's forcing him to determine where his focus lies, between old bedrooms with grief lurking in the corner, or an uncertain, deeper commitment that might lie ahead. And since it's a Jack Antonoff record, he's pulling on broad strokes of garish small-town Americana, with the horns and the mid-80s synth-pop worship, and the implications of Mickey Mantle of all people to heighten that emotion of breaking free of that town where everyone knows your name and tracing a brand new path in order to settle down and start that idealized family, whatever that might lead to be. And ultimately, it links to a sense that in order to find that purity of that artistic expression down below, you have to travel with that inbuilt gut feeling and throw his second-guessing the four winds and just go for it, and I can respect that. And yet, I really wish that, considering this narrative is likely very autobiographical, that said partner in this case, she's Lena Dunham. Now look, I normally try to avoid bringing up artists' personal lives in these sort of reviews, given that it can reflect a certain lack of professionalism, but this is relevant here because A, Lena Dunham has been Jack Antonoff's partner for years now, B, she's got a highly distinctive artistic style in her own right in film and TV thanks to her long-running series Girls, which also tends to be a fair bit more autobiographical than Lena Dunham would like to admit, and keep in mind, I still do like that show, and C, she actually appears in a vocal snippet on the song Goodbye. She's not the only one. everyone. I mean, Carly Rae Jepsen shows up briefly on Hate That You Know Me so well, and she's fine there. And Lorde only serves to remind me that the pairing of Jack Antonoff as producer for her is kind of inspired from melodrama, and we'll get to that in a few weeks. But it's the most relevant because while Lena Dunham does show that same sort of devil-may-care charge forward in her own art, it has also come at the increasing loss of self-awareness and a lack of consideration of the ideas that could underscore her work. There is something to be said for shooting big in some of the transgressive elements, but the mark of maturity for an artist comes in the instinct and poise to know when to actually step back and think a little bit, or see the bigger picture, which became an increasingly frustrating issue on both Girls and any time that Lena Dunham tried to make a political statement in 2016. Sure, it might not be as raw in that form, but truly great art can balance out that intensity with intellectual muscle, or at least poise outside of a very limited worldview, which is where Lena Dunham has really struggled, and where she might be rubbing off on Jack Antonoff in a bad way in the writing. For one, as much as she might feel like she's got a similar desire to be real for him on Goodbye, the words that she chooses here, they kind of feel a little like deflection and talking around her issues rather than confronting them, especially when it's clear that Jack Antonoff is at least trying to charge forward and deal with a very real loss in his past, say of his sister and his own mental struggles. And yet, nowhere is that lack of restraint and self-awareness for him coming through most in his vocals. As I said 3 years ago, Jack Antonoff is easily at his most compelling when he's sticking in his mid to low register with a lot of firm overdubs, reminiscent of, say, Matt Berninger of The National. Here, though, he careens across these raw, binaural pickups with production choices ranging from those overdubs and harmonies to the blocky auto-tune, wild screeching, especially on Good Morning that did not sound good, and a painful falsetto that cuts across a bridge of Everybody Lost Somebody, and especially the redundant closing track Foreign Girls, where you can tell there's still a desire for some form of wistful escape from settling down. And really, considering it's Lena Dunham, I can't exactly blame him for that. And yet, for as much of the thematic arc is kind of frustrating for me, what becomes even more so is the production and the instrumentation. And again, this is where I get the impression that Jack Antonoff wasn't really paying attention to his strengths on his previous record, namely a strong focus on central melody lines and the explosive 80s inspired hooks that made Strange Desire, even that album being as so messy as it was, you could always count on him to swing back for the massive melodic hook anchored in big synths and supported by swells of smoldering guitar that actually had a little bit of edge to it and some power. And sure, there were choppy vocal samples that peppered that record to intensify the flurry of confused emotion, but they were never a central focus. And yet, right from the very first track, Dream of Mickey Mantle, you get the foundation of something with the lure of runny guitars beneath the drum machine break beats and a pretty great crescendo against that hook, but the actual song structure beneath it, it feels kind of compromised, especially with all these vocal samples all around him. And it gets even worse on Good Morning, and also where the real problem of this album starts to come through, a focus more on repeated melodic motifs and fragments rather than fully fleshed out songs with distinct hooks and unique identity. Oh sure, you get a couple songs that feel a little bit more developed. Hate That You Know Me So Well has the spiky new wave flavor that frankly Marianas Trench handled a lot more consistently 2 years ago on Astoria. All My Heroes, that's even more wiry and sharper. Shame that it focuses more on an extended outro than its absolutely phenomenal hook that I really liked. Then you have the more gentle, arranged, but buzzy swell of Nothing Is You. And of course, Don't Take the Money, which probably has the most stable hook, courtesy of that huge overdubbed vocals that are just playing off the big drums, the synth, and those keening guitars. And speaking of keening, can somebody please tell Nico Segal that that painfully thin trumpet filter has gotten really old for as much as it pops up a fair bit across this record? I mean, it's tolerable on Everybody Lost Somebody. That's more because of a great pre-chorus and a really strong hook that is then compromised by that shredded falsetto that sounds really bad on the bridge. Hell, Let's Get Married is probably a song that is close enough in tone and swell to match Strange Desire, and yet even then, its reckless desperation coming through in the lyrics gives me less of a rush of exuberance at the thrill of getting married and more of a sinking feeling in my gut that this potential marriage is a really, really bad idea. But note that with everything I'm talking about when it comes to hooks and melody, more often than not, that main melody isn't really anchored to a striking synth line or a huge guitar presence, or indeed much guitar at all, which absolutely blows my mind considering Jack Antonoff got started as a guitarist for fun. I mean, think think about that. He's taking his primary instrument and contorting his voice through mixes and a thematic construct that when he's not second-guessing, he seems to be playing to the wrong artistic impulses altogether. And yet, even with all that, I can't say this is a bad album, because the hooks are all there, and the writing does have some weight at its best moments, and because Jack Antonoff is a good pop songwriter, and this sort of sheer go-for-broke earnestness does resonate for me on some level. But man, this should be so much better than it is. As such, I'm giving it a light 7 out of 10 and a tentative recommendation, but a much stronger recommendation to go hear Strange Desire if you haven't heard it. It's a great album. But hey, Jack Antonoff is the executive producer behind Lorde's upcoming album Melodrama, so you know what? We haven't seen the last of him yet. I still have hopes going forward. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I'm not really sure where people are going to fall on this. I've seen a little bit of a mixed reception for some people. I actually think I came out a little higher on it than I originally did on my first couple listens, because it did not hit me in a good way. But hey, I guess it kind of grows on you after a while. I do tend to like a lot of this sort of earnestness. Beyond that, if you want to buy the album, links in the description below, and I got the poll up there so where fans can tell me whether or not they liked it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week contributors get to vote on my schedule, and once per week the higher contributors get to add records or even movies to that schedule. More details right there, but until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.